Imagine scoring the biggest goal your country has celebrated in decades. The stadium erupts, your teammates pile on top of you, millions watching around the world believe they've just witnessed history. Then, someone you've never seen before, sitting hundreds of feet away in a room full of monitors, decides it never happened. Not because the ball missed the net, not because the assistant referee raised a flag, but because 17 seconds earlier, another challenge somewhere else on the field changed everything. That moment didn't just change a match, it changed how football feels. Argentina versus Egypt at the 2026 World Cup will always be remembered as an incredible comeback. But that isn't the story we're telling today. Because long after people forget the score, they'll still be arguing about the goal that disappeared. What happens when football becomes perfectly fair, but stops feeling the same? Every World Cup creates a surprise, a team that arrives with little expectation and slowly convinces the world it belongs. In 2026, that team was Egypt. Their supporters didn't expect miracles, they expected belief. Led by Mohamed Salah, Egypt carried the hopes of millions who had waited decades to see their nation compete on football's biggest stage. Across the tunnel stood a completely different kind of pressure. Argentina, one of football's greatest nations. Every tournament begins with the same expectation, not simply to compete, to win. Anything less feels like failure. That burden follows every Argentine team, especially when Lionel Messi is still wearing the shirt. For Egypt, this was an opportunity. For Argentina, it was an obligation. Those are two very different emotions. History tells us that underdogs play with freedom, favorites play with fear. And for much of this match, it showed. Egypt defended with discipline. Every tackle mattered.
Every clearance was celebrated. Every attack carried the possibility of changing history. Argentina controlled possession. They created chances. They looked like the stronger side. But football has never rewarded possession alone. Sometimes belief is enough. As the minutes passed, Egypt grew stronger. Argentina grew more anxious. The crowd could sense it. So could the players. Then came the moment that looked as though it would define Egypt's greatest football victory. The ball crossed the line. Egypt celebrated. The bench exploded. Supporters embraced strangers. Argentina stood stunned. For a few glorious seconds, the impossible had become reality. And then, the referee stopped everything. Not because he had seen something, because someone else had. From that instant forward, the match stopped belonging entirely to the players. It became something much larger. It became a debate about the future of football itself. There was a time when football's greatest moments lasted forever. Nostalgic. The ball hit the back of the net. The referee pointed to the center circle. And that was the end of the discussion. Fans celebrated. Excited players believed. History moved forward. There were mistakes. Everyone knew that. Sometimes referees got it wrong. Sometimes championships were decided by human error. Those moments became part of football folklore. The hand of God, Frank Lampard's goal that crossed the line but wasn't given. Thierry Henry's infamous handball against Ireland. Those moments hurt, sighs, but they were immediate. They belonged to the game. VAR was created to fix that. Its mission sounded simple: correct the clear and obvious mistakes. Protect the integrity of football. Give referees one more chance to get the biggest decisions right. Almost everyone agreed. If technology could prevent injustice, why wouldn't you use it? But every solution creates a new question. Not, can technology find the truth? Instead, how much of the game should technology be allowed to examine? That question came crashing into Argentina versus Egypt. Egypt had done the impossible. They found the net again. Players sprinted toward the corner. Supporters celebrated. For a brief moment, they believed they had one foot in the World Cup quarterfinals. Then came the signal. The referee held a finger to his earpiece. The celebration slowed, then stopped. No one inside the stadium knew why. Players waited. Coaches waited. Millions watching around the world waited. Football had become suspended in time. The replay wasn't looking at the shot. It wasn't checking for offside. It wasn't checking whether the ball crossed the line. Instead, The officials were examining something that had happened earlier in the attacking move, a challenge involving Marwan Adia and Lisandro Martinez, a piece of contact that most people hadn't noticed in real time. According to the review, that challenge was enough to invalidate everything that followed. 17 seconds, one tackle, one decision. An entire nation's celebration erased. The goal was disallowed. Argentina survived. Egypt couldn't believe it. Almost immediately, the debate began. Some refereeing analysts argued that VAR had reached too far back into the buildup. Others insisted the protocol had been applied exactly as written, and that's where this story becomes bigger than one football match. The rules and the emotions no longer agreed. By the letter of the law, the review could be justified, but for millions watching, justice didn't feel like justice. Football has always been emotional first. You celebrate because you believe. You cry because you know what just happened. VAR introduced something entirely new: doubt. Now every celebration carries a question. Should we celebrate or should we wait? That hesitation lasts only seconds. But in football, those seconds change everything. Because once celebration becomes conditional, the game itself begins to feel different. And while Egypt was still trying to process what had happened, the momentum quietly began to shift. Argentina sensed it. The crowd sensed it. The match had changed, not simply because of the score, but because belief had changed sides. Football is a game of momentum. You can't measure it. You can't see it on a statistics sheet, but every player knows exactly when it changes. For nearly an hour, Egypt had controlled the emotional rhythm of the match. Every clearance brought confidence. Every Argentine mistake brought belief. The underdog wasn't just surviving, they were making Argentina uncomfortable. Then the goal disappeared. The scoreboard didn't change, but something else did: belief. For Egypt, the emotional high of what should have been a decisive goal was replaced by frustration. Frustrated, instead of preparing for the next kickoff, they were arguing, trying to understand, trying to accept. Argentina experienced the opposite. They had been given something every great team knows how to use: hopeful hope. Championship teams don't always need an invitation. Sometimes they only need a second chance. Determined, the statistics had always suggested Argentina was the stronger side. They controlled possession, created more chances, forced Egypt deeper into its own half. But football isn't won on statistics alone. It is won by moments, and suddenly, the moments belonged to Argentina. Wave after wave of attack followed. The pressure became relentless. Egypt defended bravely. Every block, every interception, every tackle delayed what felt increasingly inevitable. Then, the breakthrough. Christian Romero found the net. The deficit was cut. The stadium changed. Argentine supporters, quiet for much of the evening, found their voices again. Egypt suddenly faced something new, not just 11 opponents, an entire stadium pulling against them. Momentum is contagious. Confidence spreads. So does doubt. Just minutes later, Lionel Messi reminded the world why the greatest players rarely disappear for an entire match. They only need one opportunity, one touch, one opening, one moment. His equalizer wasn't just another goal. It was the emotional turning point of the entire night. Everything Egypt had built was gone. The lead, the confidence, the certainty. The impossible dream had become a desperate fight simply to survive. As stoppage time approached, exhaustion began to show. Bodies slowed, decisions became rushed. Every clearance invited another attack. Every minute felt longer than the last. Then came the final blow. Enzo Fernandez rose above the defense and powered home the winner. Just minutes earlier, Argentina had been staring at elimination. Now they were celebrating one of the most dramatic comebacks of the tournament. When the final whistle sounded, the scoreboard read, Argentina 3, Egypt 2. For many viewers, that was the end of the story, a classic comeback, another chapter in Argentina's football history. But for millions of others, the match had never stopped being about the decision, because one question refused to disappear. If that goal had stood, would any of this have happened? It's a question no replay can answer, and that's exactly why people are still asking it. When the dust settled, sighs, Argentina advanced. Egypt went home. That's how history records it. But the scoreboard only tells us who moved on. It doesn't tell us what changed. For decades, football accepted imperfection. Referees missed offside calls. They missed handballs. They awarded goals that shouldn't have counted. They denied goals that should have. Supporters argued for years. Players carried those moments with them forever. It wasn't fair, but it was human. VAR promised something different. Not perfection, but fewer mistakes, fewer controversies, a fairer game, and in many ways, thoughtful. It has delivered exactly that. Clear offsides are identified. Mistaken identities are corrected. Violent conduct no longer escapes unnoticed. Championships are less likely to be decided by obvious officiating errors. Those are real victories. But football has discovered something unexpected. Justice has a cost. The game used to pause only for injuries. Now it pauses for certainty. Goals are celebrated, then reconsidered. Fans glance at the referee before embracing the stranger beside them. Players hesitate. Commentators fill the silence. For a few seconds, everyone waits for permission to feel something. That may be the greatest change VAR has brought to football, not the decisions, the emotion. After Argentina versus Egypt, the reaction spread far beyond the two countries. Egypt's football federation questioned the use of VAR and argued that the intervention had fundamentally altered the match. Refereeing analysts debated whether the review had crossed the threshold of what should be considered a clear and obvious error. Some defended the decision as a correct application of the laws of the game. Others believed it reached too far back into the attacking move. Notice what almost no one was arguing about: the football itself. The conversation had shifted. Technology had become the main character. And perhaps that's the real legacy of this match. Football once argued about what happened. Now it argues about how we decide what happened. Maybe that's progress, maybe it isn't, because every generation of supporters values something different. Some want absolute accuracy. Others believe the game's imperfections are part of its soul. Neither side is entirely wrong. Every fan has experienced the joy of a goal that should have counted. Every fan has also suffered because one didn't. VAR was created to remove injustice, but no technology can remove heartbreak. It can only change who experiences it. Argentina earned one of the greatest comebacks of the tournament. Nothing should diminish the resilience they showed after falling behind. Egypt earned the respect of the football world for pushing one of the sport's giants to the brink. Nothing should erase the courage they displayed. Both things can be true. The comeback was real, the controversy was real.
And perhaps that's why this match will be remembered, not because it settled the debate over VAR, but because it reminded us that football has never been only about getting the right answer. It's about how the game makes us feel. And no machine, no matter how advanced, will ever be able to measure that. The next time your team scores, pay attention to what happens. Do you celebrate immediately, or do you look toward the referee, waiting for a signal from somewhere off the pitch? That tiny moment of hesitation didn't exist a generation ago. Now it's part of every major match. Maybe that's the inevitable price of making football fairer, or maybe it's the moment the game quietly became something different. Argentina advanced. Egypt went home. But the real question never found an answer. Can football ever become perfectly fair without losing part of what made us fall in love with it in the first place? This is Beyond the Box Score, because sometimes the biggest story isn't the final score, it's everything the score can't tell you.